Hi, this is Annie of ByAnnie.com and Patterns by Annie. Thank you so much for joining us today for Live with Annie. As usual, we've started the stream a bit early. This helps us get everything set up and broadcasting properly to our various platforms. You can find a countdown clock on the screen showing how long it will be until we actually go live. While you wait, please connect with us and other viewers in the chat. Let us know where you are from and whether you're a new or longtime viewer. We'll see you live soon! Thanks again for joining us for Live with Annie. We are so happy to have you with us today. While you wait for the program to start, we hope you'll enjoy the content playing on screen. There's so much inspiration, so take a moment to tell us what you love in the chat. Don't forget there is a countdown clock on the screen so you know how long until we go live. Hi, it's Annie again, reminding you that we'll be going live with this week's episode shortly. There is a countdown clock on the screen showing how much time is left. You've got just enough time to grab some water or a beverage of your choice and a snack, and to connect with us in the chat. We'd love to hear what you've been working on this week. back to remind you that we'll be starting this week's live very shortly. We've got a really fun episode planned for today, and we'll see you soon.
Hi everyone, I'm Casey of ByAnnie.com and Patterns by Annie. Thanks so much for joining us for episode 38 of season 4 of Live with Annie. I'm excited to be with you all and launch our annual SewPINK Initiative. The main bulk of today's programming is a bosom buddy sew-along with Annie. That's these cute little seatbelt covers. We have a number of shops actively sewing at the same time, and we hope you can as well. So please join me as I show you some amazing things happening this month, and then join Annie for some sewing fun. Note, I am filling in for Annie on live today since she's busy all week teaching virtual classes for some wonderful makers in New Zealand. Annie had to cancel her trip due to an illness, and she's grateful that the show organizers made it possible for her to connect with everyone online. She sends special thanks to Kim of Kim Z Sewing in Australia for taking the time to not only jump over the pond there and help in the classroom with everyone. I know there were some interesting snafus yesterday with labels and that kind of thing that really needed somebody on site to help figure out and solve. We really look forward to seeing lots of fun submissions to our monthly photo contest from these Kiwi makers. As always, if you enjoy these episodes, please take a minute to follow us wherever you're watching us. And if you know someone else who you think might enjoy the information that we share, we'd love it if you'd tell them about Live with Annie. The easiest way to do that is to tag them while you're watching. That can take them directly to the episode so they can watch it, be it YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, or more. Also, we love reading your comments, so please be sure to interact with us throughout the presentation. We do have at least 2 sections for comments at the end of my little presentation here, and then also after the sew-along. I should note that since Annie is busy today teaching a class live virtually in New Zealand from just upstairs, we will be presenting instead a sew-along that we filmed in 2020, but is it the exact content that we need, so we're really excited to be able to give you the best we can with Annie there. As always, tell us what you think about what we're showing, share your tips and tricks, and tell us what projects you're working on and when you're going to submit to our photo contest. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a script and we're moving too fast. We want to know what you think, and we love learning from you. Be sure to add any questions you might have in the comments and chat, and we'll be best to answer those when we close. In our last episode, in case you missed it, from September 11th, we had a wonderful interview with Seth Apter, a mixed media artist and designer for Free Spirit. You can watch it and any of the 173 past episodes on our website, Facebook, YouTube channel, or otherwise. And we hope that anything you missed, you do go catch up on. We'll put some links on the screen to make that easy to find. I'm supposed to drink some water according to the team. But let's dig in. First, SewPINK. What is it? Where are we headed, and why does it matter? Our goal with SewPINK has always been to make a year-long campaign. Why? For 2 reasons. Prevention, detection, and self-care doesn't just happen in October. Depending on your risk factors, breast cancer, or really any other disease, or really any other disease, should be monitored throughout the year. Yes, for those at a risk for breast cancer, this means a periodic self-exam while in the shower. Not to mention, for every other disease, healthy eating and exercise habits. And number two, when we talk about prevention, detection, and self-care, we want everyone to remember that breast cancer isn't the only risk out there. There is a full year of cancer awareness months, and here are just a few: testicular cancer, mouth cancer, skin cancer, and more. Many of these can be identified and addressed and mitigated with early detection. So, for the more rambunctious ones out there, I do want you to remember that examinations can be done with the partner. Wink, wink. Risking to myself here, my wife and ByAnnie pattern designer, Gloria, actually helped me find something just this year. Nothing crazy. I was just itching a mole on my face. She noticed that and it started a conversation. When we're talking with, that led me to set up a meeting with a doctor. We reviewed a series of photos over the years and noticed that it had both grown and had an odd form. I always joke with the staff about what happens if I get hit by a bus or they get hit by a bus. Do we have our systems developed enough to be able to solve issues? Well, skin cancer could be that bus for me, right? While the biopsy ended up being clear, going to the doctor was a great exercise in taking action to help ensure that I'm around for my son, wife, mom, friends, and all of you for a long time to come. And all that said, let's talk a little bit more about October. As I mentioned, October is officially Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Many companies have joined the call to promote awareness during October, and we are not unique in that. For that reason, our October activities are primarily to help serve as a community organizer and promoter. Along those lines, Along those lines, I want to first send out a shout out to stores that are watching and hosting live events right now and watch parties for the Sew Along. We have Aaron Matthews Sewing, Time Flies Quilt and Sew, Miss Haberdashery, Sewvac City, Casey Maker Studio, and Stewart Sewing Machines over in Illinois, and going towards the other coast, In Stitches over in California. Welcome to everyone at those shops. We look forward to hearing about your sewing and sharing more. Note, for all the shops out there, if you would like to host your own, Jake, I'm not sure if this is my screen, but if you go all the way up to the top. Sorry, I'm just bouncing around. Keep going up. Big old blue banner there at the top hopefully shows, because I know we do have a little bit of cut content. For all the shops out there, if you'd like to host your own event later this month or even throughout the year, please submit a request via the link at the top of the SewPINK page, and we'll get you some free copies of the Bosom Buddy so that you can host your events. Moving on to the blog hop, so we'll go back down now, Jake. Right here. I'm so pleased to let you know that we have 3 patterns live and ready right now with SewPINK's launch as of yesterday. Of course, our Bosom Buddy pattern, which is a seatbelt cover, and I hope you'll stay with us to sew today, as well as I'll talk you through getting access to it. Number 2, the Shannon Fabrics Mastectomy Pillow, which includes a full video tutorial and pattern, great for ports or anything else in order to protect yourself when laying down. And then Fat Quarter Shop's Woven Hearts Quilt pattern and Sew Along, which is running from October 1st through November 29th. I don't think I'm very big, but just as you see me come up on screen periodically, know that this quilt here on the back is a modified version of that to fit our space. And I love the way the piecing makes an abstract and modern heart design. It's very cool. Be sure to join all of these events. If you'll switch back to the main SewPINK calendar there, Jake. Bouncing around for you. Go forward so we don't get confused. 2 more. Yeah, right there. Perfect. Sorry, we put this together last minute as far as the assets go. Jake has done an incredible job of supporting me and making sure that I can pull this off. Be sure to join all of these and get all the patterns and have fun sewing. Today, we also have the first blog hop post from Quilting Elisa. Elisa was our guest on Live with Annie, episode 29, and she has this incredible post with an amazing Everyday Everyway bag, and included on it something from way back in 2019, SewFinity's SewPINK project, which was a foundation paper pieced ribbon. If you keep scrolling down, both of you guys, one major thing to note for everybody, be sure to enter Quilting Elisa's giveaway. She's got a bundle including some bright pink fabrics there, as well as the Bowl Me Over. So exciting little project and a great opportunity to win something. Jake, if you'll take me back to the calendar there for a bit, I believe is where we go. Thank you to Elisa, Fat Quarter Shop, and Shannon Fabrics, and everybody ongoing with the daily blogs. Please come back regularly, check out the newest content, and enjoy. Just click on the image on any of the blogs in order to navigate to their projects and highlights. With all of that, if as you read all these amazing posts, videos, patterns, etc., and more, if you find value in them, we do ask that you pull out your pocketbook and donate. We've established a team to raise money for the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, and please donate there. Funds go to advance research so that we can save lives and improve outcomes. Think what a pattern is worth to you. Even a $10 donation will go a long way. I note Fat Quarter Shop has a goal of $10,000 and is already halfway through. I'd like to match that, and ByAnnie has agreed to match up to $5,000 throughout the campaign. So if you guys can blow away that 2,000 number there next to the donate button, we'll be matching that, and we'll really be raising a lot of funds this year. Thank you so much. Now, last but not least, before I get Annie back up here, let me put on my webmaster hat and take you on a quick tour of the website to help you get access to the Bosom Buddy pattern and videos. Gloria's laughing at me for some reason. I don't know what I did. Sorry. You'll want those before you start the Sew Along with Annie today, because that's where the PDF is. And I just want to mention, if you haven't done this and you're just joining us because you didn't know what the today's program was about, you can definitely hit pause and come back and continue watching. You can also come back to this later today. All of our ByAnnie episodes are live and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the year on the website, YouTube, and Facebook. Here we are on the ByAnnie.com website. I'm not sure what's live. As you can see, we took over the front of the page with a great way to get directly to that SewPINK page right away for going to look at the blogs, etc. But if you're going for Bosom Buddy, number one, my first suggestion, every time you're coming to us for course content, add-on videos, etc., is to go sign in. So you click up there on the sign in. Jake's then going to switch over to another tab that we have pre-populated with my login information, and go ahead and hit login. Once you're on the logged in page, you can always, if you already have access to a course, you can click right there on the button in the center, go to My Courses or Digital Library. But in this case, we're just assuming, and in fact, I know I don't have access to it. So the easiest way is to go up to the search button, search bar, type in Bosom. And here's another thing that I hammer on all the time. Look before you click. The bottom results there that he's scrolling through are the blogs. If he goes back up, the first result, and the first result always is going to be a product, which means you're probably paying for it. The second result should be courses, which are add-on videos, which you get for free with the coupon, or in this case, the free Bosom Buddy pattern and videos. If he clicks on that, it'll take us over. And this is one thing that I understand is still causing a little bit of confusion, in that you can see there's a few blue linked items that you can click on that are previewable, but not everything. The reason for not everything is you do have to join the course, which is the button on the left there. This helps us track enrollment, know how many people are involved, and also know how many people are completing our content. And we think that's important because we are an education company. But super simple, he clicks that, boom, you're enrolled, everything turns blue. And then particularly for following along with the Sew Along, you may want to have the Bosom Buddy PDF available to you. So that is in the pattern grouping there. If he clicks on that, it will bring up a preview, which you can view there. Or in the center of the screen, there is a little download icon, and that can get you the PDF content to either print or view in whatever viewer you prefer. Oh, sorry, we had a little bit of, so down there in the center, there's the download content icon. And that's true for all PDFs on any of our courses, okay? So, without further ado, let me send you back to, I believe, a 2020 Annie, and enjoy sewing with her the Bosom Buddy pattern.
So I think we're looking good and about ready to get started. So I want to tell you a little bit about the project that we're going to be working on today. This is a pattern called Bosom Buddy that we designed to make a seatbelt cushion. It's part of our promotion for October called SewPINK, which is to raise awareness of breast cancer and get people out to get their mammograms and do the self-checks and hopefully help raise some money for research to reduce the risk and damage that this horrible disease causes. This pattern makes a cushion that is, people who've had breast cancer surgery often have a really difficult time when they get in the car because the seat belt, presses against areas that are sore and tender and makes it difficult to travel. And also anybody who's had surgery that maybe has a chemo port or something put in has the same problem. I have the same problem because I'm short and the seatbelt ends up riding up against my neck. So this is perfect for all of those things. It makes a cushion that has 2 layers of soft and stable, so it's really soft and cushiony. You just position it against your body, open the little, I'm going to do this without being right next to my microphone so it's not quite so loud, but it has a piece of hook and loop fastener on there. You position your seatbelt on here, fold this over, fasten it, and then you can adjust the height wherever you need it. Hopefully I'm not messing your ears up with running this into my microphone. But anyway, this simple and easy to do, easy to adjust. And, even somebody who's had surgery on the stomach, they can wear it on the lap belt. There's so many ways to use it. So we're going to work to make this today. It's a simple and easy project. Hopefully you've already downloaded the pattern. The pattern is available at our website. To download, just go to patterns, click on the free patterns, and you'll find it, or do a search for Bosom Buddy, and you'll find it. We did a full video tutorial to go with it that you can also download and watch. But if today we're going to walk through it as well. You might want to watch that video if you missed something today or if you join us late, because it goes through the whole project step by step. This is also available as a printed pattern. So if you don't have a printer, or if you want to share them with your sewing group or your guild, you can find them on our website in packs of 10. They're great for projects to do with friends. And they're printed in full color, 4 pages, so really easy to work with. A really nice heavy paper too. So that said, let's get started. So if you look at the pattern, you're going to see a list of supplies that you need. Basically, you need 2 fabrics, a main fabric, which becomes the body of the cushion, and a coordinating fabric that we use to make the belt wrap and also the binding. There's so many ways you can mix this up if you want. We did one where we used just a single fabric because we wanted to see how that would look. This would make a great masculine one for a guy. I had to laugh when I saw this fabric because I said this would be perfect for my son-in-law because he could spill oil on it and never get in trouble because it looks like that when it starts out. So that's a fun one to do, depending on who you're making it for. This is a little more masculine design one, or you can go super feminine. We took this one and added some Tula pink ribbon down the front to embellish the belt wrap. There's just all kinds of ways that you can make this unique and really special for yourself or for someone else that you're making it for. These are awesome to do for gifts. If you know somebody who's had breast cancer surgery and you want to make something special that they'll really enjoy, this is a great gift, or to make as donations as well. So those are the fabrics you need. You also need some soft and stable, which is what we use inside for cushioning. This, we do double layers, so it's really extra soft. And we really strongly recommend using this. You could use batting if you have leftover batting, but it's not going to have nearly the same soft, cushiony feel. So soft and stable, this is a great one because they're not very big pieces. A great one for using up scraps that you might have left over from a bag or purse project. Then you also need a bit of hook and loop tape. You may know this as Velcro because that's a trademarked name. We can't use that in our patterns, so we call it by its generic purpose, which is hook and loop tape. You'll need a 7.5-inch strip of that. So hopefully you've already cut out your pieces. We've got 2 pieces that we're cutting out of our main fabric, a front and a back for the cushion. I picked a fun fabric that has barns and sheep on it. I wanted to pick something that was directional so that we could talk a little bit about, you know, how you place those if you're using a directional fabric. And then I picked these fun little rain boots to use for my belt wrap. And then I picked a third fabric. I love stripes cut on a bias for binding, so I picked a red and white stripe to use for my binding. So I added a third fabric, which you're more than welcome to do too. This is a perfect project for using fabrics from your stash and little bits of leftovers from everything. In fact, my binding that I'm going to end up using was left over from another project too. So keep this in mind for anything that you might have left from another project. It doesn't use very much of anything. All right, the other thing you need is a little bit of interfacing, and that's going to be used to interface the pieces for the belt wrap. So I've already prepared my pieces for my belt wrap by adding the interfacing to them, but in the pattern it tells you to do that as you prepare each piece. So we'll talk about those as we get to them. All right, so our very first step is to prepare the pieces for the cushion, and for that we are going to use our cushion front and back, which were cut from our main fabric, and our 2 pieces of soft and stable. These are all cut the same size, and basically what we're going to do is position our fabric on top of our soft and stable and stitch around the edge to hold the pieces together. You can do this with a walking foot, you can do it with a regular foot, whichever one you prefer. I actually have my walking foot here, but I think I'm just going to use my regular foot. I'm most used to that. I do like when I do this, if I'm using a regular foot, to do one that's closed in the front so that the fabric stays nice and flat. So I'll probably put in like my number 1, or maybe I'll do my number 10 foot, my edge stitch foot, and then I can use it to go all the way around. This is a great procedure or technique to learn if you want to make any of our bags or purses and not quilt them. So we are not going to quilt these pieces. If you love the quilted look and would prefer to quilt these, there's no reason you can't. So if you want to do some quilting lines through these, feel free. Your pieces might shrink up a little bit, which will make your cushion maybe a little bit smaller, but it's not going to be the end of the world. Just make sure that they're both the same size when you go to put them together. So we've cut these, we're going to stitch around them. I'm just going to take some Wonder Clips and clip these together to hold the layers together. And then I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around to join the pieces. If you don't have Wonder Clips, you can also join them with pins. Let me finish clipping this one and then I'll show you a tip if you're using pins. So again, we're using just a single layer of soft and stable and a single layer of fabric. If you do want to do pins, I recommend that you get the pieces smoothed so they're even all the way around. And then I like to put the pins in so that they're angled out. I think that helps put a little bit of pressure on the fabric and makes it kind of go a little bit straighter and holds it out to the outside. So we're going to get all of those pinned, and then we're just going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge around this. Again, I'm going to switch to my edge stitch foot. This is a great foot that the Bernina makes. It's like for stitching in the ditch, but I like using it on this because I can line this little bar up against the edge, move my needle over, and then I know I'm the same distance away all the way around. All right, the other thing that I use if I'm not using a walking foot is I like using a stiletto, because I can use it to help hold my fabric flat and keep it from moving away from me. So I hold it at a right angle to the needle, about 1 inch ahead of where I'm sewing, and I just use it to hold the fabric in place. All right, we're ready to go. So we're just going to sew all the way around each of these pieces. And I'm going to try not to talk while I do this, just because I don't want you to have to listen to me over the noise of the machine. I'll try and do it as quick as I can. In fact, I'm going to lengthen my stitch length a little bit. Maybe that'll go faster. All right, one done. We'll do the next one quickly, and then we can move on to make the belt wrap. The main thing when you're doing this is you want to make sure that you're keeping your fabric nice and smooth. And the beautiful thing about Soft and Stable is that it has a really softly napped surface, so it really helps hold that in place so it's not shifting and sliding on you. Okay, so we've got our cushion back done, our cushion front done. I guess we can decide which is going to be which. So one's going to go on the back, which is really not going to be visible. The other one's going to go on the front, and the belt wrap's going to go right down the middle. I think I'm going to make this the front, because if I do that, you're going to see little bits of barn, and here it's going to be nicely hidden. So I'll set the back aside. On the front, we're going to mark some lines. And these are going to be 2 1/4 inch down from the top and up from the bottom, and then 2 1/8 inch from each side. And these are just temporary lines that are going to be used for attaching the belt wrap. So I'm going to use something that's really temporary. I'm going to use my Clover chalk marker. I don't need these to last very long, and this is perfect. And it should show up really well too. So again, we're going 2 1/4 inch down from the top, up from the bottom. And then 2 1/8 inch in from each side. And I think those, boy, that didn't look straight at all. That's the nice thing about this type of marker. You can just rub it away if it's not right. Did I not have my angle on here right? That looks much better. All right. These say to go all the way to the top and bottom, but basically I need to see them here and here, so I'm not going to worry about going all the way to the top. I'm just going to go an inch or so beyond that line on each side of that line. All right, so we've got that marked and that's ready to go. We can set that aside, and our next step is to prepare the belt wrap. All right, so for the belt wrap, we've made this, the belt wrap is this part. It's the part that opens up and you put the seatbelt inside. And we've done it so that you've got one big piece on the inside, and this is belt wrap A. And then you've got a piece here that has the other side of, we've attached the soft side of the hook and loop fastener to that. On the other side, this one, which is belt wrap C, I believe, we've attached the hook side of the hook and loop fastener. And then belt wrap B is what's going to show on the outside. Actually, I think that's wrong. Let me think about this. Yeah, belt wrap B is what shows on the outside. This is the one that if you want to fussy cut something like we did here where we centered the pandas, you want to make sure that you've got the center of that 1.5 inches from this edge over here so that you get that nice and centered in between there. So I kind of did that on this, although on here I've got boots going all the way across. I didn't worry too much about it. But we're going to start by preparing belt wrap A, which is the big piece. The first step of that is to fuse the piece of fusible interfacing to the back. I've already done that on my piece to save some time. And then our next step is to attach the soft side of the hook and loop tape to that. So to make sure that when we close our wrap, our pieces line up exactly, we're going to mark some lines so that we know these match and really hold your seatbelt securely in place. And I'm going to mark these with a washout marker just because I think it'll be easier for you to see. So we're going to begin by marking a vertical line 3/8 of an inch in from the right side. Because my fabric is directional, I want to make sure I have the top at the top so I know I'm marking on the right side. If your fabric isn't, it's not going to matter as much, but you want to make sure on some of the pieces where you're marking them that you know where the top is. It's going to be really easy for me because of the directionality of my fabric. All right, so we're going to mark a line 3/8 inch in from the side on the right side. When I do markings like this, I always make sure that I have the lines on my ruler on the outside of the fabric because my marking pencil or pen, whatever you're using, always adds a little bit to it. So I want to make sure that my lines on the ruler are on the outside of the fabric. And I'm going to mark 3/8 inch in. And then I'm going to mark an inch long line, 1.5 inches from the bottom and from the top to the inside of the line we just marked. So the length on this isn't really critical. The distance from the top is, but its purpose is to align the hook and loop fastener. So if it's a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, that's not going to matter. All right, we've got that line marked. What did I do with my lid? Right there. And now we're going to attach our hook and loop tape. And can someone hand me a glue stick? So we've got a, thank you. We've got a 7.5 inch piece of hook and loop tape. We're going to separate that into 2 pieces. And we're going to take the soft side of it and center it on here between those lines that we just marked and to the inside of the vertical one. So that's going to make sure that it's positioned right where it needs to be to close the belt wrap. And I like just putting a little glue from a washable school glue stick on the back. Boy, this one is drying up, but that'll work. I don't know if you know, but if you have a glue stick that's all dried up, just put some water in it and put the lid back on it and let it sit overnight, and it'll be good as new and ready to use. So I need to add a little water to that one, I think. All right, so I'm going to center my hook and loop tape between those lines, and actually mine are extending a tiny bit beyond the line, probably because I didn't exactly mark it, but that's okay. Get it centered. And then we're going to sew around this. When I sew around this, I want to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I want to go around it twice. You want this to be really good and sturdy because that's going to get a lot of wear and tear every time you move it or take it off. And so you don't want it coming undone. It would be hard to go back and fix it later. So I'm going to just leave my edge stitch foot on and go around this twice, and I'm going to change my stitch length though back down to a 2.5, which is what I usually use to make sure it's good and strong. All right, once around, we'll do it one more time. What's that? Okay. Well, it tells me I can talk while I'm sewing, so my problem is I have to concentrate while I'm sewing. So I may not do too much talking while I'm sewing because otherwise my lines won't be straight. Okay, they gave me the option, so that's good to know that I can. All right, that piece is on and belt wrap A is ready to go. All right, let's move on to belt wrap B, which actually I have already done what needs to be done on it. It's a super simple strip or step. Basically, because I've got directional fabric, I want to make sure I've got the top at the top, turn it around, and I'm going to fuse a 4.5 inch wide piece of interfacing on, making sure I'm aligning it on this right side. That leaves the left side with no interfacing for a 1/2 inch. Then you just take your fabric and fold it over against the interfacing and press it so that when you're done, you have a 4.5 inch wide by 10 inch piece. You don't have to stitch that down at all. The purpose of this whole thing is that we want to be able to sew these together and sew all the way around it and turn it here so that we don't have to finish any edges or turn it right side out. We just turn the whole piece all at once rather than trying to turn it through a little opening. That's always hard. And so the purpose of that is that we'll have a finished edge all the way around. When you sew this onto the bag or onto the cushion, that seam is hidden in the middle on the back. So that's why you don't have to do anything special to finish it because it's all on the back of the cushion. So, all right, so we've got A ready, B ready. Now we're ready to work on belt wrap C. And for this one, again, we're going to fuse interfacing to the back of it. And then we're going to position it so it's taller than it's wide and mark the top with a pin. This is again where I had said earlier that if you don't have directional fabric, there are some points where you need to make sure that you've got the top marked, because when we mark lines on here, we've got to make sure that we put this where it belongs, or otherwise our Velcro won't match when we close it. So on mine, I'm not going to bother with the pin because I easily can tell where the top is. All right, now we're going to mark some lines on this one, and we're marking 1 3/4 in from the right. Yeah, let me make sure I read it right. I'm just going to do it with my chalk marker here. So 1 3/4 in from the right. And and then 1.25 inches up from the bottom and 1 inch across. All right, and those are positioning lines for positioning our other belt wrap fastener, which is the scratchy side or the hook side. And we're going to align it to the inside of the line marked 1 3/4 from the right and between the two marked horizontal lines. So again, I'll just put some glue on there from my glue stick. That's good enough. And make sure I haven't turned it. Yep, still got it right side up. So inside that line and under those lines. All right. And then I'm going to do the same thing to sew that piece of hook and loop in place. One question that I sometimes get is, where do you sew on the hook and loop tape? I like to sew fairly close to that edge so that I'm not sewing right on top of the hooks. You'll notice that sometimes if your stitching looks a little crooked and wonky, it's because it's hitting those hooks. But if you stay just to the outside of those, usually you can get a nice smooth stitch. I also recommend we use SewFINK 50, which is a 50 weight polyester thread. I find that especially when I'm sewing on hook and loop, that thread seems to hold up a little bit better. Sometimes a cotton thread, when it goes through the hook and loop tape, wants to tear. I'm not sure I went across that twice. We'll do it once more across there. All right, so we've got belt wrap C ready to go, and now we're ready to join the 3 pieces to assemble the belt wrap. So our first step is to lay belt wrap A out, which is the big one. Make sure that you've got the hook and loop fastener on the right side. Then on top of that, aligned on the right side, we're going to position belt wrap B. And I'm going to just hold this in place with Wonder Clips. You can also use pins. I find that every time I use pins, I just tear the heck out of my hands because I poke myself. So anytime I can use Wonder Clips, I do. When we first designed this, we recommended pins because we had you round the corners while it was pinned together, but we figured out an easier way to do that by sewing around it and then rounding the corners, so clips will work. All right, then we're going to take belt wrap C, which is the one that has the scratchy side of the hook and loop. Make sure you've got the top at the top. So if you've got a pin marking the top, make sure it's at the top and then take that pin out because you don't need it once you sew it together. It's just there to make sure you get that positioned right. And you're going to align that along the other edge and you can clip that in place. And then we're going to sew a scant quarter of an inch all the way around this. So I'm going to switch to my 1/4 inch foot and move my needle position over one to make that scant. And we're just going to go all the way around. By sewing the layers together, when we get ready to round the corners in the next step, it's going to be really easy because nothing's going to shift and slide on us. So I'm switching my needle position back to the middle, putting my 1/4 inch foot on, and then I'm going to move my needle position over one click to the right so that I have a scant 1/4 inch seam. And I'm just going to go all the way around this piece. Hopefully you're all moving at the same rate as I am and keeping up with me. If not, know that you can watch this again, and you can also watch the video tutorial, the add-on video tutorial that we filmed to go with it. If you've got any questions about anything you're doing, Trevor and Brooke are both watching for those, so feel free to share any questions or comments that you have with us. Yes. We do have one question, okay.
Yeah, the glue you put on the hook and loop, is that going to gum up the needle in the machine?
You know, when I glue this, I always use a washable school glue stick, and I've never ever had trouble with it gumming up my needle. There are glue sticks that I've used that do gum it up, and some that I've had to use alcohol to clean my needle off, but I've never had trouble with this. And you might notice too, I put it towards the middle of the hook and loop, and I sewed on the outside. So usually when I put it on, I'm not really sewing through the area where I put it. But no, I've had great success with Elmer's washable school glue sticks. All right, now that we've got that sewn all the way around, we're going to round these corners because it's going to be way easier to turn this and press it and make it look really good if we've got rounded corners. And we're going to just use a 2.5 inch circle to do that. The pattern tells you to mark around it and then cut on the marked line, but because I've got this sewn together, I'm just going to cut. I'm not going to bother to mark it and then cut. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter because that's just way easier than scissors for me. So when you're ready to round corners, and we do this in a lot of our patterns, we think that a rounded corner looks nice. It also makes it much easier if you're doing a dimensional bag to join the pieces around a rounded corner. On this particular pattern, it's not a huge deal if you don't have exactly a 2.5 inch circle, but if you were joining pieces to make a bag and I said use a 2.5 inch circle, in that case it's really important. So we love these little rulers that Creative Grids make. They come in a set of 2.5 all the way up to 6.5, and we use these all the time. So we've got patterns that call for all the sizes. If you're looking to treat yourself to a new tool and you don't have these, you will never ever regret having them. We absolutely love these, and they're strong and sturdy. We've used these hundreds of times, and they're still 2.5 inch. They don't, you don't end up slicing part of it away like you do if you're using a plastic or paper template. So the secret when you're rounding corners is to make sure that you've got the edge of your circle aligned with the edge of your fabric on each side. And then we're just going to cut this excess fabric away. And I may have to stand up to do that because my eyes aren't that good from the side. All right, round that off. Cut that. And just go all the way around and around all 4 of your corners. Now when I do my next stitch, I'm going to put a different color of thread in. I found earlier when I did this that with the white thread, because after we sew around this, we're going to clip these corners, and I found I could not see where the stitching was with the white thread in there. And so I'm going to put some blue thread in here so that I can see it more easily when I go to clip those corners. One question that I don't know if anybody's asked yet, but it's a question I get often, is what needle do you use when you're sewing? And we always use a 90-14 top stitch needle. It's strong and sturdy. The best thing about it is that the eye is twice as big as a regular needle, so when it's time to thread your needle, you can see it. So if you've got old eyes, you'll love that needle. All right, now I'm going to move my needle position back to the center, so I'm sewing with an accurate 1/4 inch seam, and I'm just going to go all the way around this piece, rounding the corners as I go. And you'll notice that as I go, I'm keeping my foot really parallel to the piece as I go, especially when I go around the corners. I don't want my foot going like that or like that, because then I'm going to not have a smooth edge. All right. Okay, so I've sewn all the way around, nice smooth corners. And now before we turn this inside out, we want to clip these corners so we can reduce the bulk on these rounded edges. This is a tip that I learned from Mindy, who's one of my pattern testers and sewers. And she has a background in garment sewing. And she taught me a trick for making sure that you don't end up cutting through your stitching here. So rather than coming in like this and clipping, which especially if you have old eyes like me, is sometimes hard to see. She takes her fabric and folds it and then cuts, making sure that she cuts from just outside the seam line out. And that gives you a really nice little notch in each corner. So I just fold over a little bit at a time and clip those, again, sewing or starting from outside the seam line. This is a step that really makes a difference in making your belt wrap lay nice and smooth, is getting rid of some of this excess fabric that goes in these corners. And having that blue thread in there made that way easier. It's strange for me to be teaching a class and have nobody talking or answering. So hopefully you're enjoying this and learning something. And if you've got questions, you're thinking to ask them.
Annie,
Yes.
if you were sewing this for a child, is there a way you could resize the pattern at all?
Absolutely. I would leave the belt wrap the same size as it is, because your seat belt's going to be the same size no matter what. But you could make the cushion shorter. I don't know that you'd need to make it much narrower. I don't think, I mean, I think anybody is going to be about that size, but probably the length would be, and you could certainly make the belt wrap shorter. What I would say probably do is make one the way it's designed and then try it on the child that you want to make one for and see what fits for them. But yeah, shorter might be nicer for sure. But for me, and I'm not very big, this is a very comfortable size. And you know, the cushion part on it's going to bend a little bit too. That could give way. Okay, here we go. Thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate it. All right, so we just finished sewing all the way around the belt wrap and clipping the corners. And our next step is to turn that right side out. You're going to love how easy this is, because we're not trying to go through a little opening that we left in the side. It's super simple to reach in, push out your corners on each side of that side, and then come around here and push out all of these corners. And then you'll just close that up. Take that to the ironing board and give that a nice press, making sure that you don't see, you know, you've got it right on the edges. I've already done one and done that because I didn't want to have to leave and go press. But when you're done, it's going to look like this. So we've got belt wrap A with the Velcro attached. You're going to mark some lines once you get it nice and pressed, and those are marked 2 5/8 and 4 7/8 from the right. Make sure you're measuring from the side that has the soft side of the hook and loop tape attached. And on the back, you've got your little opening where the two pieces were, but again, that's going to be hidden when we sew it on. That's our next step to attach this to the cushion front. So get the one that you marked the lines on and align this right in between the lines. So I want to make sure that I've got my top up on each piece. We're only sewing through the cushion front. We don't want the lines attaching this to come through on the back. So we've got just one layer here. So I'm going to line my lines up there and there. Align it on that line, and then I'm going to put some pins in there. Wonder clips don't really work well on this step. sew some pins in to hold that there. And on this end. And then we're going to sew this in place. And when we sew this, we're going to sew down this line, across, up this line, across. And I'd probably do that twice too, just to make sure it's good and sturdy. For this, I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot, and I think I'm going to go across the top first. And I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the top and across the bottom. And I've got my blue thread in there, but that's fine. Again, my stiletto held at a right angle next to it just helps keep the layers together and keeps it from shifting and pushing down. You could use a walking foot on this too. I like my 1/4 inch foot because I know when I'm 1/8 of an inch from the edge. I also like that it's wide open in the front so I can really see my line and stitch along that easily. All right, we're going to go around one more time. And when you go around the second time, just try and stitch right on top of the line that you stitched earlier. Get that pin out of there so I don't poke myself. Okay, once you've got your felt wrap sewn to your cushion front, go ahead and close the Velcro so that that's in the middle and it doesn't get caught in your neck seams. And now we're ready to join the front and back. Make sure you've got both pieces. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure you've got the top at the top on each, and then just layer them on top of each other. Put some wonder clips on to hold those together. And then you're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch all the way around to join those layers. You could round the corners before you do that, but again, we've found that if the pieces are sewn together, it's way easier to round the corners and make sure that they match. So we'll sew and then we'll round the corners. One question that I'm often asked is, how do you sew through bulk when you're working with soft and stable, and how do you deal with the bulky areas? I break needles. I can tell you that I rarely break a needle because of bulk. And if I do, it's because I'm pulling or pushing on the piece, which then causes my needle to bend, and that's what causes it to break. But going through layers isn't going to break your needle. This is only 2 layers of fabric and 2 layers of soft and stable, so it's not a whole lot of bulk, but it's a little bit more than what you may be used to sewing. Just let the machine do the work of pulling or pushing the fabric through. The feed dogs will do it. Don't pull and push on it, and let it go, and it should be easy. The other thing to know is that the more you sew through soft and stable, the more it compresses. So every line of stitching that you do through it helps mash the layers down. So we did that first line of stitching to sew the pieces together. That mashed it down a little. This line of stitching will mash it down a little bit more. So when we're ready to attach the binding, it's going to be a lot flatter than if we were just sewing straight to 2 layers of soft and stable. So extra layers of stitching in the seam allowance will really help reduce bulk if you are having trouble going through lots of layers. I was looking at this and thinking, these sheep throw me every time. I think they're upside down, but they're not. So I've got the top at the top. All right, we've got our cushion back sewn to our cushion front with our belt wrap attached. Our next step is to round these corners so that when we go to bind it, it's going to be super simple and easy. And for this, we recommend using a 3.5 inch circle just to make it a little bit more rounded. I am on this one going to mark it and then stitch inside it before I cut it, because that's going to hold all my layers together, and I'm not going to have problems with, you know, one side of the fabric folding away or pulling away. It's especially helpful if you're doing something that has mesh on one side or the other, because the mesh really wants to pull away from the seams, and sewing it before you cut it just solves all kinds of problems. So I'm going to mark these. And again, we're lining our ruler up with the edges, and we're just marking around the part that extends beyond the rounded edge of the circle ruler. There is, if you downloaded the pattern before maybe the last month, you may not have gotten a pattern with labels for your pieces or templates for the circles. Go download a new version, because we've added all of those in the pattern. So if you don't have circle rulers, you can always cut templates and make them out of template plastic or paper to mark around. All right, now I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch inside each of those. And as I said before, the more stitching in this, the more it compresses the layers. So I usually just go around again. I never worry about stitching an extra line of stitching around it, because it just helps to compress everything. And for me, since I don't have an automatic thread cutter on my machine, it's almost as fast to just sew a few more inches than to try and clip my threads and not have them get caught underneath. So I'm keeping the inside edge of the toe on my machine right along that line to stitch 1/8 of an inch inside those rounded edges. Okay, right now that I've sewn that and it's sewn all the way around the edge, I can just take my circle ruler and rotary cutter and round all the corners. If you end up with something like that, we'll come back and fix that with scissors. Anytime you're cutting through something as cushiony as this, your fabric's gonna lift up a little bit in there and you might get an uneven edge a little bit. So we'll just use our scissors to smooth that out a little bit more. I think I'm trying to hurry a little bit, so that doesn't help. All right, so our cushion's ready. Our last step is to make our bias binding and use our binding to trim all these edges to give it a really beautiful finished look. So for that, we've cut an 11-inch square of fabric, which will make just the right amount of binding for this project. And I'm going to just run through real quickly the technique to do that. So I've got this 11-inch square. I've got my 12-inch ruler here, and you can see my ruler's not going to be big enough. What we want to do is cut this diagonally from corner to corner. Here's a tip. Take this square, and this is especially helpful if you're using big squares. On some of our projects, we use 24-inch squares, and nobody's going to have a ruler big enough to cut that diagonally. Fold this in half so that you make a triangle, and then take your ruler, line it up on here, and make sure you've got this line even across, and you want your tip right there at the tip. So get that even there and there, and then cut along the edge of your ruler, and that gives you 2 triangles. So basically, you've cut your square in half from corner to corner. So then take those squares, and we're going to join these to make a parallelogram, and from this parallelogram we're going to cut our bias binding. If you, I'm not going to go through all the techniques for this, but if you go to our website, we have a free pattern called Easy Does It, and we did a really thorough video in that for that project that talks about matching stripes and all kinds of tips and techniques on it. But basically, you're going to take one square and position it, one triangle, and position it so it makes a mountain. So it has a peak at the top. You're going to take the other one and position it so the peak is at the bottom. I call that a valley. And you're going to put those next to each other and then fold your valley over onto your mountain and join these along this edge. If you're working with stripes, as I am here, it's fun to align the stripes and make sure they match. Make sure you watch that video because I've got more tips about that. I'm not going to take the time to really carefully pin each of these, but if I was doing this in real life and not in a hurry, I would probably put a pin on every single one of these stripes and make sure that when I was done, I had a really seamless join. All right, so I've got that pinned, and now we're going to sew across this with a 1/4 inch seam. We want to make sure that we're sewing from cleavage to cleavage normally. Because I adjusted this a little bit to make sure that my stripes matched, it's going to be a little bit off here on the edge. But sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'll show you what we'll do next. I don't know if you've noticed, but I keep 2 pin cushions. One with my extra fine pins for pinning fabrics, another one with my heavy duty quilting pins. And I like to have each pin in its separate pin cushion so that I can just grab and I'm not having to pay attention to getting the right type of pin. All right, so we've sewn that together with our 1/4 inch seam. We're going to take that, actually that looks pretty darn good. We're going to take that to the ironing board, press that seam open. I'm just going to do it with my pressing tool here. So press that seam open so it's nice and flat, and then you're going to cut your strips out of this. And for this project, we're cutting 2 1/4 inch strips. You can see my ruler doesn't go from side to side, even on a small square like this. So here's another tip. Take that parallelogram, fold it over so that your edges are even down here, and this is going kind of right along that seam. It doesn't have to be right on the seam. It can be off to the side a little bit, but this is important, that it's straight here and it's straight here. And then you can take your ruler and align it on there, and you've got plenty of room. So make sure that this is nice and straight here, that you've got your 2 1/4 here. And then I love this little rotating Omnigrid mat because I can turn it right where I need it. So there's one strip cut. I normally use my Creative Grid's 4 1/2 inch ruler for this because it's just the right width for 2 strips. And then I have a line marked for the middle on the 2 1/4, so I don't have to move my ruler as much. But this works. So you're going to get 3 strips out of that. If you've got the printed patterns, we've fixed it on the downloadable pattern, but you're going to notice that the picture for that step shows 4 strips. You only get 3, and that's enough. So you've got all your strips cut, and then you're going to join those. And you want to join them on the ends that match. So when I first started, I had a heck of a time trying to figure out how to line those up. Here's what I figured out. If I take them and lay them like what I want them to look like when they're done, all I have to do is take this strip, fold it over on top, line it up, get my little cleavage on each end, and then sew across this with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm not going to do that because I've got a piece already prepared, but you're going to sew across that with a 1/4 inch seam. You'll press your seam open, trim any dog ears, and join all of your pieces to make one long strip. I've already done that on this. And then what I like to do is take that strip and fold it in half and pin it every 3 to 4 inches. When I started doing bindings, I pressed my binding in half. And I had a nice sharp crease, and I didn't have to have pins in it. But I was, at the very first class I ever taught, I was complaining about the fact that sometimes I had wrinkles in my binding and I couldn't figure out why, because I thought I was being really careful. And one of the ladies in the class, her name was Cheryl, said, "How did you prepare your binding?" And so I explained to her what I did, and she said, "Did you press it in half?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I pressed it in half." And she said, "Well, that's your problem. If you will skip pressing it, you'll avoid those problems." And I have never pressed another binding and not had that problem again. So here's the secret. Take your binding, make sure you have it laying flat. We can get this guy out of the way. Make sure you have it laying nice and flat on a table. Bring your raw edges together so they're even, and just put your pins in at a right angle so that they're going to be easy to remove. And then I just take my whole piece of binding and line it up. But not having that sharp crease in here really helps to eliminate a lot of the wrinkles and stuff that you get in your binding. All right, on this project, this is going to be the parts that's visible. So we want the binding to look the best on this side. So I'm going to first sew the binding to the back and then bring it around to the front and stitch it down. When I do my join on my binding, I like to use a diagonal seam because it lays flat and I think it looks the nicest. So I want to be able to join that where I have the most room. So right here is a perfect place to join my ends. So I'm going to leave a tail that ends about in the middle of that piece, and I'm going to start stitching down here towards this corner. I'm going to stitch with an accurate 1/4 inch seam all the way until I get about right here, and then I'll join my ends, finish stitching my binding in place, and then turn it to the front and stitch around that edge. So I don't clip my binding in place. I never realized I did this until somebody clipped a binding down for me, and I got done and had about this much extra binding because I stretch my binding a little bit as I go. So, so clipping it doesn't work. So we're going to go over here. We're going to use our 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to switch back to white thread for this. And we want to sew with a really accurate 1/4 inch seam. We want to keep our foot parallel to the piece and our edges of our binding even with our piece. And what you're going to find is that's a lot to pay attention to. So I always say, concentrate on keeping your foot parallel to the piece and your edges even. If you go smaller than a 1/4 inch, you can always go back and add to it. Just don't go bigger than a 1/4 inch. And I find that even when I think I'm being really careful to sew a 1/4 inch, most of the time I'm sewing less. So I will sew around it and join my ends, and then I usually just go back around it again with a really accurate 1/4 inch seam. Because if your seam isn't an accurate 1/4 inch seam, your binding's not going to cover the way you want it to. So we've got that in place, and we're just going to start stitching. And again, we're going to try and do really accurate 1/4 inch seam all the way around here. So as I get to these corners, and corners are one of the things that always scares people, the secret is, again, to make sure that the binding's staying even with the edge and that you're not sewing any creases in it. So as I get ready to do that, I use my stiletto to help hold it in place here, and then I use my fingers here to smooth the fabric out. And if you're having any trouble seeing this, watch our video for this project, watch our video for our Peacekeeper project or our Easy Does It. All of those have closer camera angles with Jake right over my shoulder, so you might find it a little easier to see there. Jake didn't want to be in the picture today, so he's on the other side.
Someone asked if you ever use a binding attachment.
I do not use a binding attachment, and I was going through my stuff the other day, and I found a Bernina binding foot that I bought because somebody told me that it really works out really well, and I have to be honest and say I completely forgot I had it, and I haven't even tried it. But when I look at the instructions for how it works, I'm not convinced that it would be easier than this. So no, I don't, but I'm open to it. One of these days I need to dig that out and try it. So no, I just use my 1/4 inch foot and I sew around it. So again, you can see I'm not, my binding's not pinned in place. I'm just kind of aligning it along the edges as I go, and I'm using this hand to really keep that binding nice and smooth and flat. You don't want to sew wrinkles in it because that's also going to give you a wrinkly binding. Jake, can you find my triangle rulers? Because I'm going to need those next. They should be hanging on the end of the table. Thank you. You'll notice that I use this stiletto a lot. I don't think I could sew without it, but it really helps. It's like another hand to really help hold things in place and position them where you want them. All right, so we're going to go across the top and part way just a little bit down this side, and then we're going to join our ends. All right. So we've gone all the way around. We're going to join our ends here with a diagonal seam, and then we can finish. And this is a technique. I love joining ends with a diagonal seam because it spreads your seam over a larger area and you don't have a big bump in your binding where your seam is. So the first thing that I do is I move this first tail where we started out of the way, and I take my piece that's left here and I give it just a tiny bit of a stretch. Can you see that? I call it hospital bed taut. So it's kind of like putting your fitted sheets on the bed. So I take this and I bring it so that it's even, and then I actually like to use the quilting pin for this because I'm going through more layers. But I pin that to my cushion so that it holds it in place. And I'm just going to get these pins out of here so I don't get confused. Then I'm going to take my first side of the strip down and align it next to that. And I want to mark where this end of the strip intersects with that end so that I can add a seam allowance to it and cut it and join them. And they're going to fit really well. So this strip has a top and a bottom. This strip has a top and a bottom. And so I want to find the point where this end of this strip, which is the top, matches the top of the second strip. The hardest thing for me is getting my fingers in here and separating it. So I've got that marked, that's that point. Now I'm going to find this point, which is the bottom of this strip, and mark that point on the bottom of the second strip. So not really a second strip, it's the other end of the strip. Okay, so right there. And I put the pin in, so it's just going through that single layer of fabric 2 or 3 times so it doesn't come out. Then I can unpin this and lay this out on my cutting mat. I'm going to go ahead and get these other pins out of my binding because we're done with that. I'm going to lay this out and I'm going to cut. Now, if I was going to cut from that point to that point, my 2 strips would exactly match each other and I wouldn't have anything for a seam allowance. So I have to add 2 1/4-inch seam allowances to this. So I have to add a 1/4 inch. And I've got these little triangle rulers that make this task really easy because they don't get in the way. This one, which is an Omnigrid 98, has lines marked every 1/4 inch. So I find the 1/2 inch line and I line it up so that it's right on top of my 2 pins. So I've got 1 line there on that pin, 1 line there on that pin, and I know if I cut along this edge, I'm going to have a 1/2 inch added, so 2 1/4 inch seam allowances. Rather than cutting on that end though, I take my other triangle ruler and I butt it up against that to make sure it's nice and even. I also want to make sure it's nice and even on this side. I don't think I've ever had it come out so even on my first try. So that was lucky. Sometimes you have to maneuver it a little bit. But I've got that aligned there. Now I can get this ruler out of the way. I can get my pins out of the way because it's the most frustrating thing in the world to hit a pin with your rotary cutter and nick it. And then, and this is really important, I take this ruler and I scoot it up about 1/8 of an inch or so because I want this seam when I sew it, I want it to be really tight. If it's loose, then I'm going to have wrinkles in my binding. So I'm going to cut along there, and then I'm going to take these 2 ends and sew them together. And I will admit that I usually gulp when I look at that because it never looks like there's a 1/2 inch extra, but it always works out. So then just bring your right sides of those 2 strips together and line them up with your little cleavage on each end. And I usually put 3 or 4 pins in here to hold this in place so that it doesn't come undone. If you're working in really tight quarters, like on a carrying strap pad, you're for sure going to want that. And you can even use a Wonder Clip or something on this piece to hold it together. But get those held together, and then we're going to sew across that with a 1/4 inch seam. Again, all of this is in our video tutorials that are online. So if you're not catching it all today, check those out. Again, you're going to have much better camera angles on those, so it'll be a little easier to see. So we're joining this with a 1/4 inch seam. Not sure I did a perfect job on that, but it'll work. Then I take this seam and use my stiletto, my pressing tool end of my stiletto to press that seam open and match my ends up. Now usually, boy, I did not do a very good job on that at all. Oh, we're just going to call it good. It'll be caught in the seam. The one thing that I have learned about sewing is you can stress over perfection. Usually I like to do a little bit better when someone's watching me, but you know, it's a cushion. It's going to go on my seat belt. If the binding's not absolutely perfect, I'm just going to fudge that right there when I sew it. So I've got that pinned. I'm going to finish sewing here, and then we'll test to make sure that it covers our edges evenly all the way around. All right, that fit together beautifully. All right, now I'm going to trim these little dog ears off of here. And then we're going to fold our binding around to the front and test to make sure that it covers our seam. Now, did you see how when I folded that around, I had a whole bunch of wrinkles in it? This is why I'm glad I didn't press that, because all I have to do is kind of take my fingers along there and massage it, and I can usually get rid of any of those wrinkles. All right, so as this comes around, here's what we want to pay attention to. We want to make sure that this folded edge of this is just past this line of stitching that was used to attach the binding. And I can see already it's not, it's way too far. It's going to be too far. So that means I didn't sew an accurate 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to go back, go all the way around, and refine that seam allowance, which I have to do fairly regularly. So we'll just start up here at the top, and this time I'm not paying attention to lining my raw edges up, dealing with pins, keeping it all aligned. It's going to be way easier this time around. So now, oh yeah, I'm way off on that seam. Way more than 1/8 of an inch off. So, but again, every line of stitching is going to help compress these layers, so no worries. I'm hoping that that area where I wasn't as careful as I should have been isn't gonna come back and haunt me when we go around here. But this is the problem with sewing live. You're gonna see. Yeah, wow, on the top and bottom, I'm a whole eighth less than I should be on both of those seams. So it's a good thing I came back and fixed this. If you want a really good, beautiful binding, that's the secret, is make sure you've got a good, accurate seam. And if you got to go back and fix it, do it. And you may wonder, okay, what if my seam was too wide? I don't usually have that problem because I make sure I go narrow. But if your seam's too wide, you're either going to have to unpick it or unstitch it and redo it, or sometimes you can trim your piece a little bit. I find I run into that on corners probably more often, and I can usually trim a little bit away. But on a long straight piece like this, you're not going to want to trim it because then you're not going to have a nice straight edge. So you might just have to unstitch a little bit and redo it if it's too wide. All right, I think we're better this time. So I'm going to grab my Wonder Clips and we're going to go around this. And so I usually start by getting it mostly turned to the other side. And then I start clipping it in place. And I don't always clip. Sometimes I just start sewing. But given that I'm a little bit worried about this corner over here where I said it's going to be okay, and I may have to unpick it, we're going to do the Wonder Clips. All right, so I want to take this edge and make sure that it's just past that line of stitching, and that looks really good. And I clip it in place, and I don't, see, that still seems a little bit wide there, so I may go back and refine that a little bit. This looks good. What happens is if your binding comes too far over, then you end up sewing too far in this and your stitch shows on the other side. If it doesn't come far enough, that's actually a little bit better because with a stiletto, you can pull it into place. But if it's too wide and you make it fit there, then you end up with loose fabric out here, and then you get wrinkles on the outside edge. So this is a really important step to make sure that that's even. And see how I've got that wrinkle right there? Again, I just take my finger and I run it along here and massage it out, and I can pretty much get rid of any of those wrinkles that are coming around those edges. I don't know if you're aware too, Wonder Clips have a right side and a wrong side. And the right side is where you see the color. The bottom side is flat. So I always put them with the colored side up so they don't catch on the machine as they go through. It just makes them a lot easier to work with them. Now see here, it looks like it's going to be too tight, but that's not a problem at all. I can use my stiletto to pull that into place really easily. You can also, if you've got wrinkles in there, you can take your stiletto and kind of insert it into the fabric to help get rid of wrinkles too. All right, that looks good. We're going to call that good all the way around, and now we just stitch all the way around the outside edge to do it. Again, because we have our folded edge just beyond that line of stitching, if we stitch about 1/8 of an inch inside this edge, maybe not quite that wide, our line of stitching should pretty much fall out in the same place on the other side. I do that with varying degrees of success, and the more I do it, the better I get, and you'll find the same thing. So it takes practice. But if you can use your stiletto to help position it so that it's just past that line of stitching and just work a little bit at a time, practice makes perfect, or practice makes good. I won't say I'm perfect. As I said earlier, perfection is overrated. This is supposed to be fun. So do the best you can, and the more you do it, the better you get. Again, notice how I'm using my stiletto to push any loose threads underneath there. Sometimes you need to just grab them and clip them off. That one. There's my clippers. But I can use that to make sure that I'm pulling it just beyond that line of stitching, so all those lines are hidden. Here's a little wrinkle. I'm going to take my stiletto inside here and use it to kind of pull that little bit of fabric out so I can get that a little bit straighter. We're doing sewing classes here at ByAnnie for our staff. So every 2 weeks on Thursday or Friday afternoon, they get a couple hours to sew. And this was one of the projects that they all made recently. And I was very impressed with how well they did on their bindings. You can use this finger too to push things up underneath there and keep them nice and smooth.
Annie, someone asked what kind of table you're pushing in.
This is a koala cabinet, which I absolutely love. I think it's one designed specifically for Bernina's. The little table is made by Sew Steady, and it lets you get into your bobbin and see what you're doing. But it's really a sturdy table. It's got a little leaf that lifts up on that side, so I've got plenty of room to put my stuff. And then drawers here, and then these, there's 2 pieces on the side that you can put shelves on, and it's fabulous. Having a nice cabinet that doesn't shake and that's the right height for you is so important. And having your machine so that you're not up in the air makes such a difference. But I really love this table. And if you check with your local Bernina dealer, a lot of them can get koala cabinets for you, even if you don't sew on a Bernina. And they come with all different finishes. You can do white or oak, or I don't even know what all the colors are. I like white because it's bright. All right, we're almost to the end. Now comes the moment of truth, when we look at the other side and see how well I hit. If you don't have any of these little snippers, we sell these at ByAnnie.com, and I absolutely love them because you can get right up next to your threads, and they're curved so you don't end up cutting your fabric, but they're awesome for getting in really tight. All right, so this is the side we just did. Jake, can you kind of show that? So you notice our stitching is pretty close to the edge all the way around. And then if you look at the other side, not quite as perfect. Some of it's a little bit further out, but it looks like I pretty much hit the binding, other than right there where it goes in a little bit, and pretty much the same distance all the way around. And I wouldn't be surprised if right there is where I was too lazy to fix that edge of binding that wasn't right. But I call that perfect. All right, so my bosom buddy is done. I'm gonna put this in my car, or maybe I'll give this one to my daughter. She has some great little red boots that she wears all the time, and where she lives, she gets enough rain that she needs them. But ready to go, perfect for somebody who's short, somebody who just wants a little extra cushioning from their seat belt, or someone who's had surgery for breast cancer. I hope that you have enjoyed this today. Send us some comments and let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover. We'd love to do this more often. If there's techniques that you want little tutorials on or questions that you want answered, we would love to hear from you. We thank you so much for your support and your enthusiasm. You are what make us keep doing what we do. We love hearing from you. We love seeing pictures of what you've made. If you get your bosom buddy done, send us some pictures. We'd love to share them on our social media accounts. And if you don't already follow us on social media, go to Facebook or Instagram. It's at Patterns by Annie. We've always got fun pictures, and we have a photo contest, so send us pictures of what you're making. It's lots of inspiration. We love seeing the things that you do with our patterns or other people's patterns. If you make something using Soft and Stable or any of our products, even if it's not a ByAnnie pattern, you're eligible for the contest. And whoever wins the contest gets to go on a shopping spree at ByAnnie, so it's well worth doing. We've got lots of video tutorials on our website, 4 free patterns that are part of our ByAnnie Basics series, that if you're new to ByAnnie, we recommend that you download those patterns and watch those videos, because by the time you work through the 4 projects, you're going to feel comfortable basically tackling any of our patterns. For all of the new patterns that we've come out with, we've filmed add-on videos to go with them, which also have video tutorials to help you work through the project. And if there's no video that helps you and you've got questions on anything you're doing, feel free to call us or email us. We've got great customer service gals who sew all of our bags, and they're really good at helping you work through those things. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been really fun today. I'd love to do it again, and so let us know what you'd like to see. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed Sewing with Annie from 2020 and Sewing That Sew Along. I know I was able to check some of the comments and you did get some good tips by watching. If you're already finished, huge props to you for staying along. And in fact, you aren't alone. During the interlude there for me, right, because I wasn't doing anything, I was able to touch base with some of the shops that are hosting events. In particular, I touched base, there's too many S's and I haven't learned how not to S that out, right? I touched base with Stewart's Sewing Machines in Mount Zion, Illinois. They have 6 sewists on site right now and have already made 3 bosom buddies done. Speaking with Jana Wrigley over there at Stewart's really brought the whole project home as well, and I wanted to share that with you. Jake, are we sharing this? Good. Sorry, I'm trying to manage that I'm not the boring person here necessarily, but I will be talking about a few of these shops there as well. Jana's father was actually one of the original owners and founder of Stewart's. He had breast cancer as well. And she just wanted me to send out that reminder that breast cancer is not just a disease that hits women. She also has actually 2 sewists, long-term customers that are there sewing today that are also undergoing treatment for breast cancer. And those individuals not only share their story with the team and the friends there at Stewart's, but they're also going to take on the role of bringing bosom buddies to their treatment programs in order to share with individuals in need. And that was just beautiful to hear and share. So thank you to Jana, Stewart's, and all the sewists there for all that you do. I was also super happy to touch base with Sovac City in College Station in Texas, and also Time Flies Quilt and Sew in I'm going to butcher this one, Negwani, Michigan. Both shops actively have 6 to 8 people, I believe, there on site doing a pink party, open sewing all day, and enjoying each other's company. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right? Human interaction, having fun, and keeping each other healthy. With that, for those of you sewing together, and any time that you're sewing together at a shop, please be sure to take some amazing photos and tell us your story. You can submit those to the photo contest, and particularly if it's a SewPINK thing, you have an opportunity to win $50 in credit to ByAnnie.com. That award and several others are available year-round for both SewPINK related projects, grand prize winner, honorable mention, and quilt store highlight. So please get in there and share. Also, if you've enjoyed this sew along and have found value in any of the SewPINK posts, I do remind you about donations. Before I do that, I need to mention two things. Number one, donation in money is important, but donation in kind is also huge. People, you can't get a bosom buddy off the market, let alone with a beautiful design and something that means so much to someone. So I want to highlight two other stores real quick. Number one, Aaron Matthews Sewing in East Tawas, Michigan. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be looking down a little bit because my notes unfortunately didn't make it onto my script here. But Janet there is leading a project to make bosom buddies and donate to the local oncology department. She wanted me to mention, number one, how she came up with a number and a goal, which is that she analyzed the population of her local region. She also then analyzed the incidence of breast cancer in the general group of people there and the demographics for that region, and came up with that this year there's an anticipation of 90 people suffering from breast cancer, and particularly that may have a breast operation, which means 90 people that will directly benefit from receiving a bosom buddy. And so therefore she set the goal of 90. Already on day 2, she's 17% into that. And that's really amazing. She's going to continue collecting donations through October 31st, and we hope that it, particularly if you're in Michigan or in the area, or have any other shops that can run a program like this, you mention that and bring it to them. Along with that, I was also supposed to mention, and I thought this is very much worth keeping in mind, Aaron Matthews Sewing. Where does that come from? It comes from her daughter and her son's name, right? As you continue to participate in anything with ByAnnie, and particular a local quilt shop contest, you're always going to see these are small businesses with a ton of humanity behind them, and we want to make sure that you're aware of that, you share that, and you go promote them. Moving on a little bit more, In Stitches down in California has a goal to make 60 heart pillows today, and they're also going to host an event on Saturday, October 26th, Sewing Bosom Buddies. It's just a drop-in, no need to RSVP, but please do make sure you get down there, and also mention those ideas for any local quilt shops if you're not in Dixon, California or nearby. They also, and this is moving back to the monetary side, they've already raised $150, which is going to get matched, and that's awesome. So congratulations and thank you to everyone for doing that. If we could go down there, Shara. Finally, as I said, in-kind donations are amazing due to the personal nature of it. Monetary donations are also important. Funds raised onto our page and through the Fat Quarter Shop do go to advance research so that we can save lives and improve outcomes. Think about what a good sewing class is worth to you. Even a $30 donation will go a really long way. Beyond that, closing up, be sure to stay tuned at the end of this episode to see video clips of local quilt shops that we featured on social media this week. Again, that is where you learn about that personal story and the wonderful things shops are doing. In particular, we have 2 great shops and winners from the local quilt shop contest this year. Remember Me in Mountain Home and Sewing House in Collierville, Tennessee. Remember Me is a community hub who focuses on fostering, learning, and creativity. And as I said, in this case, is a 2-time regional winner in our LQS contest. The Sewing House is a modern shop with a touch of traditional, and they just opened their 3rd location in East Memphis. You gotta love growth and the opportunity to build and expand on something that's great. We really enjoyed learning more about both of these shops and know you will too. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today. We'll be back next week, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, with another inspiring episode of Live with Annie. Annie will be here to share updates on the rest of the blog hop and to share other ideas too. Until then, happy stitching.
Hi, I'm Annie of ByAnnie.com and Patterns by Annie. Today we are visiting Remember Me Quilt Shop in Mountain Home, Arkansas. They are 2-time winners in the local quilt shop contest for the state. While Remember Me Quilt Shop won for Arkansas, their story began in Topeka, Kansas, more than 30 years ago. From Kansas, the store moved to Arkansas in the early 70s and several different locations there until they settled into their current location. When the original owner retired in 2012, Judy Mahaney purchased Remember Me Quilt Shop and continued to grow the business. Today, the shop fills 4,500 square feet of storefront, featuring Bernina, Pfaff, Burnett, and Handy Quilter sewing machines, fabrics from dozens of designers, and of course, a lovely selection of ByAnnie products. Anyone who has known Judy for long knows that she's a lifelong sewist, specializing in all sorts of apparel, including wedding dresses. However, she didn't get to quilting until she and her husband moved to Arkansas to retire and live near her quilting sister. Yet even before she could start learning from her sister, the opportunity arose to buy her local quilt shop, and the rest is history. Since then, Judy says she hasn't worked a single day. It's a blessing to have a reason to get up every morning and the wonderful opportunity to share our days with quilting friends who just happen to be our customers. With the help of her staff, the shop has a constant rotation of classes, as well as guest educators, keeping the local customers always learning and feeling supported in their quilt making. A customer, Susan, shared this story with us. One weekend I was frustrated because I had miscut my quilt pattern and did not have enough material to finish. I thought that I had bought the last of the fabric and was very distraught. I went into the shop and the staff hunted all over the store and found me a couple of fat quarters so I was able to finish my project. We all understand that panic of being a little short on fabric. What a lovely gesture of camaraderie from the folks at Remember Me Quilt Shop. Known as the trout fishing capital of the world, Mountain Home offers more than just a great quilt shop. Set in the gorgeous Ozark Mountains, 3 rivers, the White, the Buffalo, and the Norfolk, are perfect for fishing, and the nearby Bull Shoals Lake and Norfolk Lake are filled with all sorts of water activities. If you like the water, Judy says, this is the place for you. If you live near them or are planning a trip to Arkansas, be sure to stop in to Remember Me Quilt Shop and check them out. Don't forget to check their class calendar first and see what kind of fun you might be able to join. You can find out more about the store at remembermequilts.com. And until next time, happy stitching! Hi, I'm Annie of ByAnnie.com and Patterns by Annie. Today we are visiting the Sewing House in Collierville, Tennessee. Located just outside of Memphis, the Sewing House opened in June 2021 and has been growing ever since. In 2022, they opened a second location in Tupelo, Mississippi, and they will be opening a third location in East Memphis on September 20th, 2024. The Sewing House is a modern sewing, quilting, and long arm shop that has a bit of the traditional as well. Heirloom sewing and knitting are now a strong part of the brand too, with the purchase of the Laced Cottage brand in 2023 and the addition of Delta Fiber Arts this year. Jennifer Reith opened the Sewing House with a desire to create a space where her fellow sewing enthusiasts could find everything they needed to nurture their passion. What she has created fits the bill. Customers who voted for the Sewing House in the local quilt shop contest raved about the quality and breadth of products. Nancy told us, "This shop has everything you would need or want for your quilting, sewing, embroidery, or heirloom garment projects. And since they brought in yarn, you'll be able to find what you need for crocheting and knitting, too." We love to hear from supportive spouses, and Kenneth threw in a vote for the Sewing House with this comment. "My wife loves this store, and the changes to our checking account really stand out. I'm glad she's found such a wonderful shop." With more than 6,000 square feet in their Collierville shop, they carry quilting fabrics, unique kits, Patterns, Notions, Books, and Sewing, Quilting, and Embroidery Machines by Bernina, Brother, Janome, and Handy Quilter. The store is bright, colorful, and filled with inspirational samples, opportunities for classes, and experts ready to help. If you find yourself in the Memphis area, I hope you'll take the opportunity to stop in and say hi. While you're there, make sure you check out some of the Memphis must-sees. Beale Street is filled with music and delicious barbecue. You'll want to fit in a visit to the National Civil Rights Museum as well. It was built in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The history lessons are profound and wide-ranging, so be sure to take your time. And when you get to Collierville, check out Main Street. It was voted Best Main Street in Parade magazine. You'll want to spend some time on the historic town square with boutiques, restaurants, a gazebo, a log cabin, and a restored train you can tour at the depot. And of course, be sure to visit the Sewing House. If you want to learn more about them, visit shopthesewinghouse.com. And until next time, happy stitching!